in the Friday paper there was a piece, perhaps you saw it on the news, about someone they called a Good Samaritan. A guy who was looking after a woman. There'd been a row between two families at a wedding party, and he was just bending down to take care and administer first aid to one lady who was hurt, and he got struck by a car and was killed. And it referred to him as a Good Samaritan, and we understand why. And there is a certain goodness in the world. Of course there is. And kindness and generosity. And we see it not only from Christians and in church, we get it from our neighbors, don't we? But what we are talking about here now is an absolute standard of righteousness. The highest standard, the righteousness of God Himself. That is the level we are talking about. It really helped me as we were singing earlier that I noticed that we're talking about being righteous in God's sight. You see, in each other's sight, as we look at each other, nicely dressed, nicely turned out, quite pleasant to one another. I'm sure no one's going to throw any punches after the service, certainly hope not. No one's going to say anything really mean and unkind to each other. We're all going to be quite nice to each other. But so relatively, we have that sort of level of righteousness or goodness. But when you ramp it up to the highest level, compared with the absolute goodness and perfection and righteousness of God, we have none. We fall short, as verse 23 puts it. We fail to reach that standard. So we're talking about that level. We're talking about an absolute righteousness. Relatively speaking, we're nice enough to each other, but on an ultimate scale, we have no real righteousness. So then the question you might have in your mind, and I certainly had this in my mind, so is God like some perfectionist parent? Or some grumpy old school teacher who's never happy with the performance of his pupils or children? Never satisfied. You know, the sort of thing? You could think of God that way, couldn't you? A grumpy old perfectionist. He's just never happy. We try our hardest and He's never happy. It's not good enough. Well, you could look at it that way, but please don't, because that's not the way to look at it. It's not the way it's presented in the Bible. God made us for the most beautiful life, full of goodness and love and generosity and kindness. That's what He made us for. That's how He designed us. And His intention, His determination, His plan is to redeem us back to that kind of glorious life. See, we're far short of that at the moment. Even those of us who are believers, we're far below that. But His plans are to make us the most glorious creatures. Not just to look at, but in behavior and action and love, generosity and so forth. Isn't that wonderful?